Mika Soos eventually pulled away from Isabelle Mouton and forced her way into third position. Meanwhile, Overby and the Spaniard battled on. The struggle was to take its toll on Berissategui as she blew up on the final 500 metres. Jones held on to her lead and looked formidable over the latter stages of the race. Michaeli Jones gets the salute of this 25,000-strong crowd. It's her first victory of the season, 3 times on the podium, but never to the highest point. Round 5 of the World Cup Tour goes to Jones. Marie Overby of Denmark will be delighted with her second position, her best so far this season. And Mika Soos, a very strong finish indeed to take third spot for Belgium, her best result of the tour.
On the run, I just tried to stay relaxed in the first lap, and then I was going to make my move about 5k in, and I thought, no, I'm going to try now, and it worked. So I'm really happy, my first World Cup win of the year.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I just needed this race. It's just, everything was perfect, great cars, great car. I'm so happy.
Confirmation of the women's result. Round 5 of the World Cup Tour goes to Michaeli Jones with Marie Overby and Mika Soos second and third. Mouton fourth, disappointing for Berissategui down in 5th spot. Winner of the swim, Smet settles for 6th, Bartholomew of the US 7th. Carney, her best for a long time, in 8th, Hock 9, and Natasha Badman taking 10th spot. Into the men's race, and the pre-race favourites include Sebastian Berlier, one of the young stars to emerge this year. Craig Walton, the 23-year-old Australian, must be one of the top swimmers in the field today. Greg Bennett, one of the most consistent performers on the World Tour. Chris McCormack, the reigning world champion, still with a lot to prove this season. And not forgetting Brazil's Alexandre Manzan, the in-form athlete after his 4th round victory in Gamagori. Well, once again, it's an identical course for the men as for the women. This beautiful, beautiful Glenmill Pond. And away they go for the men's elite competition. Again, Steve, there's a lot to watch out for with the World Championships just a few weeks away. And a lot of athletes out there trying to impress their national team selectors, I would have thought, today.
Well, a lot of the athletes will actually be looking to get selected. You need to get an ITU ranking to be sure of getting on the start line for the World Championship. And many of the athletes here today will be fighting for those final few points to make sure that they're on that start line in Lucerne, Switzerland.
58 of the world's finest triathletes battle it out in the opening 1,500-metre swim section. And already we can see the defending World Cup champion in the white cap there, really stroking well. That's Chris McCormack of Australia. Now, the swim course is identical to that of the women's. And if you've been with us since the start of this broadcast, the most difficult part, many saying, is the transition area, climbing that hill before the swimmers get onto the bike for part 2 of this triathlon event. Well, the early leader is 54, Ricky Jorgensen, Danish competitor who in Gamagori opted for the same tactic, really going very hard, very fast in Gamagori round 4 of the tour, only to see his endeavours weaken in both bike and closing run sections. And once again, Steve, he's spreading them out nice and early in this swim section.
I think the swim, with the wetsuit, it's going to be very congested, and I don't see the really good swimmers getting too big a lead, because there's a 300-metre run out of the water up to the transition area, and straight out of transition you go uphill for another 300 metres. So I think on the first lap, it's you know, out of the swim everyone's going to be quite close, and the damage will be done on the first lap of the bike, where the people who have done the swim a little bit easier with the lower heart rate will get away on that first lap of the bike, and then I think it's going to be survival.
Well, back to the action, and Ricky Jorgensen of Denmark's lead is short-lived. Another swim specialist, this time the Australian. Craig Walton going into top position. Jorgensen is just behind him in second spot, but as we heard in that interview there, the swim specialists unable to draw too clear. The wetsuits helping the buoyancy, I presume.
Well, the wetsuits really equalise it, Nick, and we do see the poorer swimmers just getting that little bit closer to the good swimmers than the average swimmers when the wetsuits are in action.
Well, it's going to make for a much closer transition and a much bigger pack coming out into part 2 of this event. There's no question that Craig Walton is trying his best, even with wetsuits on, to draw clear. There's the white cap of Chris McCormack rounding the buoy. And as expected, very congested. The red cap can also be spotted there. That's Greg Bennett. Another one of the consistent performers on the tour this year to watch out for, and one of the finest cyclists, many say, on the 1998 World Cup circuit. Craig Walton, as usual, took the early lead in the swim and would aim to come out in first position. Close by, former World Junior champion Chris Hill, who has never been out of the top 3 on the tour so far this year. The rest of the Aussies, Greg Bennett and Chris McCormack, around 40 seconds behind, would not want to give too much advantage to Walton. Back to the action, the final lap of 3, and we can clearly see that Walton and Jorgensen now have drawn ahead some 17 seconds of the rest of the competitors. Walton now even trying to pull away from Jorgensen as he heads for the transition area. Steve, considering wetsuits and really not the calmest of waters, a very impressive start to his challenge.
It really is an impressive start. I thought I would see Ricky Jorgensen coming out first and perhaps Walton sitting on his feet, but those positions have been reversed on this last lap.
There you can see 10, possibly 15 metres clear, heading for that difficult climb, with some fine cyclists behind them, including Greg Bennett, and Walton will be happy to be ahead of Greg Bennett coming into part 2 of this competition.
A course like this weekend is really tough. It's probably the toughest one on the ITU circuit. So you've got to work out, well, how much do I train for this one this weekend without burning myself out for the actual race? And so this one I've had to juggle, and I'll be surprised, you know, for myself to find out if I've done too much or maybe too little for this race.
Well, back to the action and the applause from the crowd. Out of the water goes Craig Walton. This has been a very impressive performance. Ricky Jorgensen of Denmark has also done well to stay with the Aussie. These two now some 31 seconds ahead of the rest. The chase pack, which we don't like to say in a swim, but it is clearly a chase pack already, is headed out of the water by Chris Hill. But we will now look to this very steep and difficult climb. Look at him pumping the arms. The running technique already kicking in before the bike section, Steve.
It's very, very hard. You have to change over, the blood pooling in the top of the body, then go straight down to the legs. And when you do have a tough run, makes it even harder getting into the bike.
Well, we've just seen McCormack and Gonzalez exiting the water, but this is Walton getting a rapturous round of applause from the crowd. And we'll easily recognise number 14, all in red. Still with around about 29 seconds. Again, a difficult transition for the triathletes, having to strip down out of the wetsuit. But the perfect start for Craig Walton. And interesting to note, Steve, Ricky Jorgensen having a slow transition.
Jorgensen's still learning his trade, I'm sure. He's been really all around the world this year. He's been doing some of the second-tier World Cup races. He picked up a 4th place in the Philippines just 6 weeks ago. But he is learning his trade, and I'm sure we're going to see him featuring in 1999.
Well, the clock ticks away now. Let's see his closest rival. It looks to be Chris Hill, exiting at 19. Well, 19 seconds we calculated he's got to go, but very impressive time from Walton, who already is into his first climb. It looks to be McCormack. Chris McCormack, well, 52 seconds. Work to do again for McCormack. And Nico Llanos is also there with him. But really, in the early stages, Craig Walton getting an absolute flyer. Jorgensen paying the penalty for a slow transition. Then Stefan Poulat and Bignet, the French triathletes, with Jean Salm taking 3rd, 4th and 5th. Well, the cycle course identical to that of the women's. 2 very difficult climbs, some very fast descents. Let's hope it's not as dramatic as the women's cycle section. Craig Walton into the lead and comfortably out there, but out there all alone, not having the benefit of a group to work with. And this will be interesting, Steve, to see whether he waits for them to catch up or he tries to go all alone.
Well, once again, we're looking at the difficulty of the course, and we can see that being displayed there by the athletes in the chase pack, really having to get out of the saddles to chase hard. It might just work to Walton's advantage here. He's going to be by himself. He's got the difficult descents to contend with. He doesn't have to worry about the whirling wheels of the others coming past him, maybe taking evading action. He looks so strong on this climb.
Well, we just saw the chase group behind Walton, headed up by Jan Rahula of the Czech Republic. Try their best to close in on Craig Walton. Here we see them working well with the French athletes, Bellier, Bennett, Poulat, but Jan Rahula takes them along. The reigning world champion, Chris McCormack, was well poised in the chase pack to make a challenge for the lead. The chase group looked to make sure that the leader's advantage was slowly whittled away. As ever, Craig Walton would aim to apply as much pressure as possible on the bike to give himself the best advantage for the run. Past the transition area, and Craig Walton through lap 2 in 51 minutes 10 seconds. Really enjoying the support of the Newfoundland crowd here. They're a little surprised perhaps to see him continue to go all alone. Steve, for me, it's been a long time since we've seen this tactic. I think it was Greg Bennett in Monaco on the World Cup Tour last season when he went all alone. It's something that we see so rarely, with Chris McCormack just looking on to see whether he can close the gap.
Well, we did see Walton come out of the water in the Sydney World Cup race, just the two of them. He was along with Benji Sanson from France, and he really did run well off the bike there, and we saw Sanson go backwards. Maybe, just maybe, we're going to see Walton with a sensation here today.
Well, he was runner-up in that Sydney World Cup race some time ago now. Still looking for his first victory on the World Cup Tour. Enrico Llanos is also trying his best to bring the chase pack along. 18 seconds behind. It's Llanos whose break, well, a little premature perhaps. Llanos 33 seconds behind Walton. Then the main chase group, headed up by 3 triathletes from the French team. Jan Rahula, Chris McCormack is amongst them as well. They need to really power on, because it looks to me as if Walton is looking to go alone, and Enrico Llanos is also looking to try and join Craig Walton. But as you can see, Walton, a man possessed, really pushing very hard indeed. Incredible speed on the descents. Seems to give due reason for Chris McCormack to try and pick up the pace of the chase pack. And we're starting to sense that with Walton out there and the Spaniard, Enrico Llanos, he's got to start driving a little harder, not to be left out of the chase going into transition. There is no question that Walton leads, but he's still driving as hard as he possibly can, with Llanos trying to catch him, showing that there is a strong Spanish presence in today's competition in Corner Brook, Newfoundland.
It's a hard course, and that's what the courses need to be now. They need to make these courses that are challenging for everyone on the bike. And then the drafting issue it's not an issue. It's strongest man on the bike or strongest woman on the bike. And a course like this is exciting. You get to challenge yourself up those hills and then try to run off the bike. And in a location like this, it's fun. I really enjoyed it.
Craig Walton continued to hold off the challenge of the main pack, though the Spaniard Enrico Llanos was unable to maintain his form and soon returned to the safety of the chase group. The main contenders still unable to develop a coherent challenge to the race leader. Craig Walton, at the start of yet another climb, really does seem to be handling these difficult stages with such ease. This is lap 3, still 50 seconds ahead. And clearly now, Steve, settling to go this one all alone.
Well, if they haven't made an impact yet, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do that on the second half of this cycle course. They're going to be feeling tired, and it's almost a group identity sets in. We're not going to catch him. Let's sit back and save it for the run section.
Well, the helicopter shot shows Rahula in the lead. Chris McCormack there just behind him. And it looks to be Stefan Poulat or one of the French competitors. That is, in fact, Wes Hobson of the United States of America taking the lead for the first time. Chris McCormack looking to go with him just in case the American decides to make a break. But look at this man, Craig Walton, absolutely flying. Very fast indeed. Steve, these must be quite frightening speeds.
Well, we talked about the women coming down at 80 km an hour. Obviously, with the extra weight of the men, they're going to be that little bit faster. So we're probably looking at 90 to maybe 100 km an hour. Just over 60 miles per hour on the descents.
I'm sure Craig Walton's quite happy to be out there all alone, because a touch at that kind of speed could be total disaster. We came very close in the women's competition, as the chase pack still unable to find Craig Walton. Still unable to track down that deficit, as Wes Hobson for the USA takes the lead again. Rahula is tucked in behind him. Craig Walton is in the lead comfortably. He's going to go all the way to the run section and look to go from start to finish to take round 5.